Now, connecting to these, right, linked to these two forms, positivism and interpretivism, you have two important assumptions that run through every research. Two important assumptions. So these are all things in which you need to be aware of, conscious of, right, before you actually start your research. And your research has to be founded on these classifications. Well, so what are these two assumptions? I mean, this is sort of connected to positivism and interpretivism. One is, they call it ontology. The other one is epistemology. Yeah. So now what is this ontology and epistemology? So partly the answer lies in positivism and partly the answer lies in interpretivism, right? Now, ontology, so any research you start will have what they call ontological assumptions. Alright? Any research that you want to study will have epistemological assumptions. Right? Once you are familiar or thorough with this ontology and epistemology, then you can do research. So now what is ontology? Ontology is the science or theory of being. Okay. You know what is being? Existence. Right? Being is nothing but existence. So it is the science or theory of existence of knowledge. Right? That is what it says. So it is existence of knowledge. Guys, you'll have to, okay for the day one. So it deals with existence of knowledge, right? So first off, when you want to do research, what is it that you want to research about? Right? What is it that you want to research about? That more or less forms your ontological assumptions. So what you want to research about is a knowledge which already exists in some form or the other. Alright? Which you want to research, investigate, examine. Alright? You want to investigate, you want to examine certain knowledge claims. Okay. It can be violence or it can be, in terms of media, it can be anything. It can be whether the ads are good, right? It can be whether, posting of certain YouTube videos, right, incriminating certain YouTube videos can result, in chaos, right, can lead to communal clashes, etc. So some knowledge claim, right, which already exists somewhere and you want to find out. So this ontological assumption for the natural scientist is different, and the ontological assumption for us, especially social scientists, it is different. We are dealing with human beings, alright? So I'm going to probably understand how a girl feels or a boy feels when his girlfriend or her boyfriend ditches, right? So there's a knowledge that exists. Now I'm going to study, alright? So this is what you call as ontological assumption. And as far as ontological assumption, well, where does this knowledge exist? And that is where positivism comes. Knowledge exists in two forms, as positivism or as interpretivism. Right? So one is what I said, knowledge is there, it's a reality, it's here. Right? If you observe the real world, then you understand something. That is what positivism says. For example, now, okay, I'm saying, okay, this is the monitor, right? So I am observing it, and I can do that through direct observation. I can look at it, and I know that this is a monitor. Alright. Now maybe if I want to do a little more on that, I can measure the dimensions of the monitor, right? I can do more of this stuff. No, but what happens here, the reality exists some space, alright? And I'm the knower. I'm the knower in the sense I'm the researcher, and that is known, what I'm trying to understand, alright? And this known is independent, is an independent entity. The knower is an independent entity. The known is also it's an independent entity, right? So I am here, I observe. So you can also observe, right? So positivism says it is an objective reality. Yeah, it is an objective reality, right? This is not going to be a cow for anyone. I don't think anybody is going to see this as a cow, right? Or some years will see this as a cat, right? So to all of us, probably it's computer, it's monitor, right? Maybe if you can see the brand, yeah, you can also say it's a HP monitor, whatever. Alright? So that is how positivism goes about doing research. So that's what natural scientists are doing, right? For them, a tree is a tree, right? So whatever research they do, we had a lot of examples. Now this is positivism. So this is one form in which knowledge exists. Reality, real world, which exists there, and there is nothing called, okay, there are two terms which you can learn later on, but I just write down. A priori, they say, right? A priori. A priori knowledge. A priori is, for example, symbolic, right? A priori is symbolic. Okay, there are two words which I don't want to explain them now. A priori, the other one is posteriori, right? A priori is like, even the slightest clue hint, you can sort of, interpret, right? So here, what happens in positivism, the knowledge has to be seen, right? Has to be observed, and only then you say that, okay, this is this object, right? That is how it is done, right? So it is mostly happening through direct observation, right? Just observe, that is it. Actually, you're not building meaning into it, no, nothing of that sort. You're not doing that. We are actually not building meaning into it, right? So I show a bottle, yeah, this is a bottle, right? So that is positivism. Okay? So I want to say that there is violence in it. Yeah, you will measure violence. So this is where positivism comes, and you are actually measuring things quantitatively, right? So in this positivism, so what is happening? The knower is the subject actually. The knower is the subject. So I am the subject, and that becomes an object. So everything that you observe, all these entities actually are objects. And these objects are there in the world, right? Now, of course, we are not dealing with such tangible. You know what tangible is? Like something which you can touch, something which has got a different structure, right? No, we are not going to deal with tangible entities or tangible stuff. When you are measuring, the research that most of the time that you are doing, it's not about, tangible stuff, right? It is something to do with emotions, it's something to do with feelings, it's something to do with violence, it's something to do with impact studies, alright? Media impact, or advertising, how does it impact, the purchase behavior, there are a lot of this stuff, right? That's what we are dealing with. But all of this are seen as, hey, that is an object, and that is going to impact, right? So how do we measure it? Right? So that is possible. This is one form of reality in the ontological assumption, so where knowledge exists. So the other form of reality is, reality does not exist beforehand. Reality does not exist beforehand. Reality is not a prefixed quality. No, it's not something which is prefixed. So I step out of this building and then there is a reality out there and I see, okay, right? It's not always like that. Yes, I step out of the building, I see a lawn, it's a reality. I step out of the building, I can see some trees, yes. These are all realities. But the kind of issues that we are dealing with in social science, it's not that they exist beforehand. So, reality does not exist beforehand, but they are constructed. Right? So even if you want to deal with this decriminalization or recriminalization issues, how do you measure it? Right? So actually these are all constructed socially. Probably there are historical or there are religious tones that are attached to this decriminalization. So religion constructs the reality here about decriminalization. Alright? Or religion constructs reality about recriminalization, whatever, right? So the religion is constructing it, and social norms and conventions and probably other histories have constructed this reality, and today we also construct reality in different ways. So now what happens in this form of, research mode of inquiry, that is interpretivism, there is nothing like, the subject and the object, where the object already exists. It is not like that. And two, we are not actually trying to understand something merely through direct observation, which is not possible, right? So when I talked about, this feeling, this emotion of dejection, these emotions of, the feeling of dejection or despair or loss of hope or despondency, all of this, how do you measure? How do you measure, right? Do we have an instrument to measure, right? Okay, if you talk about, natural science, you have a lot of instruments to measure, right? So BP can be measured using BP is it, okay? How do you measure BP? What is the instrument? Okay, you didn't do MBBS or okay, so there is an instrument available to measure BP. So there is an instrument available to measure temperature, right? So there are a lot of these instruments, to measure physiological happenings, right? Bodily, whatever happens bodily. But emotion is also something which is happening bodily, yes? It's a bodily, event, phenomenon, right? What you go through is also a bodily phenomenon. How you asking me? Right? This is a bodily phenomenon. Whatever feelings you talk about, it is a bodily phenomenon. Okay? Now, I will not go into something called phenomenology, which I'm now trying to specialize. Okay. Now, what happens? Why you say it's a bodily phenomenon? For example, now all of a sudden, this girl Suvenya, she starts banging her head on the table. Oh, sorry, Sunita. Okay. She starts banging her head on the table. Okay. And then she screams her lungs out, right? So what is the reaction is going to be, right? So you say that you fear or to her it could be frustration, right? Possessed. Then we'll have to call Aam Aadmi Party here. The party is symbol. Okay, take it in the positive. Right. So she bangs her head on the table and then she screams out her lungs, and then what do? Some people are scared, some people try to get closer to her and sort of, but there is some feeling that you are actually experiencing. When you say that, let me recoil, let me retreat, let me run away from her, whatever, but before that your actually body is experiencing something, right? Your body experiences, right? That is what you call as, affect. When you, for example, even before you actually see the ghost, most of you may not believe in ghosts, alright? There are certain events, the wind howls, right? The curtain, swings, right? And all of this, without actually having, necessarily see the ghost, they create certain feeling, right? Are you saying that you're not actually, experiencing some kind of these feelings and affects your body? It's created, it's bodily created, right? I'm not trying to look at it from a psychological position, no. Because I belong to the cultural studies, no, and so I will strongly root everything in this, right? So there is a difference between affect and emotion. Emotion is outward expression, but affect is something which goes in your body. And that affect, after it reaches the conscious stage, gets out in the form of an emotion. right before emotion, there is something which your body goes through, right? It could be anger. The outburst of anger is like you lash out at someone or you throw things, right? Fly things to all four corners, whatever. But there is something which precedes this, which is precognitive. Before it reaches the cognitive level, your body experiences actually. Right? So that's philosophy. I'll not get deep into this. Okay? So it is all, that's also bodily experience, right? All our feelings. So how do you measure that? Well, psychologists and neuroscientists would try to measure this, right? Using all equipment, and they put something similar to ECG. They can measure pulse, this, that, etc. And okay, I'm now studying what you call as embodied relations, right? So psychologists are doing it, embodied relations. They're trying to understand this. Neuroscientists are doing it, but there is another approach which is philosophical approach. Right? So that is what I'm talking about. Okay. So when a child screams, it is sort of emotion. But to a child, it is not only an emotion; it is also an affect. Why? Because its conscious level is not developed. The child in the sense I'm talking about an infant, right? So out of hunger, when it cries, when it cries, or when it, I'm not saying screaming, but when it cries, it is both an emotion and affect, right? But to us, it is different. Okay. Now I will not get into affect studies. Yeah, I am now focusing on affect and feelings, right? Affect is what I'm saying. Affect studies. Affect in different media concepts. Affect. Okay, I don't really want to get too far in affect while watching porn. Yeah, that is one way of thinking. So actually, what I'm saying is, all these are bodily experiences. That's what I'm saying. This question rose. Okay, so how are we going to measure? So in interpretivism, what happens? There is a subjective way of measuring it. So to an interpretivist, someone who is using qualitative research, he's not saying that out there lies the real world. Anyone can go measure it. So all of us can go measure it, and all of us will get the same result. No. Right? That doesn't happen. But that happens to a positivist. He is using a quantitative study to this person who adopts positivism as a mode of inquiry, which is quantitative research, right? Anyone who measures a particular phenomenon will yield the same result, right? Will yield the same result. So if I try to study the number of speeding cars I told you in the previous class, so on an average, the average should be the same, right? Okay. So there are certain phenomena, you will study. Okay, this is a monitor, right? Yeah, anyone who studies is the monitor. Right? Anyone who studies is the monitor. Alright? I will take up some examples a little later. Okay. So now what happens in interpretivism then? There is this knower who is a researcher who is trying to understand something, but he is actually interpreting, when he is dealing with human beings, he is interpreting what others interpret. Right? For example, if I am studying transgender women, alright, and how transgender women express their identity in online space, say in blogs or in websites, right? Now, there is no scale as such for me to measure, like, how I have this thermometer or whatever meter that she was talking about, right? Or whatever instruments, right? We have a very center for instrumentation, some facility there. What are you doing? You're giving away some, innuendos, like, what is this? That some indirect references that you are actually losing, patience. Well, you have in our university, there is something called Center for Instrumentation Facility. Something like that, okay? And where you have it's a pool of all, instruments which science people can use. So you'll have all big instruments, right? You have such a facility in all centers, all universities, right? It's a common sort of lab. Apart from lab, there is one facility, so they go there and they can do it, right? So they're all instruments. Alright, they're all instruments. Okay. But what kind of instrument would you use to measure, for example, when it's dead? How do you feel when? Yeah, there are a lot of studies wherein you try to find out the pain that one goes through. A cancer patient who survived, right, this disease. You want to understand, the pain and the suffering that, this gone through, whatever. Okay. Of course, we are going to deal only with such stuff in social sciences. So, how do you measure this? Do you have an instrument? Right? So, what happens here, the interpretivist, right, he uses, I said, interviews, discussions. These are the methods. Sit with her, let her talk, record, observe her non-verbal language, whatnot, etc., etc., etc. So you'll have a lot of these, data. Whose interpretation is this? Whatever the document that you're collecting? That person's interpretation, right? Similarly, if it is transgender, whatever you see in the website, right, it's that transgender's interpretation. Now, this interpretation, you are going to interpret as a researcher, right? You're going to interpret for something. You're going to study something very specific. Otherwise, what if you interview one person for 1 hour, all right, and if you interview this for like 10 persons, like, what is it, 10 hours? 10 hours of recorded data, if you convert that, if you transcribe it, what is transcription? If you type it in the form of Word, whatever, if you transcribe it, I think you will get about some 80 pages. Alright? So out of 80 pages, if 30 pages is fluff, no use. 50 pages. Now 50 pages of content you have to interpret, for which you will use theories, concepts, etc. We'll see that later. So now what is happening? The researcher is interpreting the interpretation of, right, the people who are in the study, right? Okay, it's not people who, you are not always going to examine people. You might sometimes do a content analysis or a semiotic analysis of commercials, semiotic analysis of film, right? Or framing analysis, or there's a lot of analysis. So there you are dealing with text, right? But the text has been written in a certain way, which you are again interpreting. Okay? So there is no room or scope for direct observation here. There is no scope for direct observation here. You see it? You see this? No, that kind of observation is not happening. It is through interpretation, right? So in qualitative research, then there is a lot of interpretation. But for the same reason that you are interpreting the data, positivists, they charge that qualitative research is very subjective, because it involves interpretation. Alright, that is one of the major accusations that positivists level against. Okay, they say that because you interpret it. So, interpretation, but that doesn't mean that, everyone interprets in his or her own way. Alright? But for the same reason, because it's based on interpretation, qualitative research does not try to generalize the study. You want to go to the washroom? No? Okay. Does not try to generalize the study. Now, what is generalization? I said earlier, if I do study with 100 people, right? I can say the entire, for example, I'll just choose 5 students from each department, or 5 boys and 5 girls from each department. If I go by that, I think I will select some 200, 300 students maximum out of a large pool of 4,000, 3,000 students. Now this 300 represents this 3,000. That is according to quantitative research, right? So what are they trying to do? They are trying to generalize what they do for 300 to 3,000. This is quantitative research. But qualitative research, the aim is not to generalize. The aim is to take a phenomenon and study in depth. Right? You take a small phenomenon and you study in depth. Okay. Now when that happens, there is no question. So if you want to do a similar study, you do again, right? You cannot replicate it to a larger population. So there is nothing of that sort, that takes place here. And I told you, in this part of, in fact, even the whole of South India, you have mostly quantitative researchers. So whenever I attend interview, what is your research on? My research is on this. What's the sample size? Sample size is 80, I say. 80? Who's your guide? Who's your supervisor? I mean, there can't be research, without 300, anything less than 300 or 400 sample size. But that is quantitative research. That is quantitative research. Because 300, 400, you are distributing questionnaire and you get the data, you analyze, that's fine. 80 people, what I did was, each and every one accessed 4 different websites. Each website for 40 minutes on an average. Right? 80 into 4 into 40. Imagine, that's the audio file. I studied, how they access websites, and I used a software, and I got them recorded in the form of AVI file. Once. So it's like 80 into 40 into 4, and then focus group discussion. Alright? 8 students, 1 hour. So 80 students, 80 by 8, 10. 10 groups, 10 hours. 10 hours of focus group data. You transcribe this audio data. Focus group is like, they speak, you ask, I will discuss that. They speak and you record, so there's so much of audio data. Now if you transcribe it, it easily comes to, let's say, 80 pages. Out of 80 pages, at least 50 pages will be, the rest of the 30 pages, let's say, it's of no use. Now, you have to analyze 50 pages of data, and you have to analyze 80 into 40 into 80 into 40 is 3,200 into 4 is like 128.00, right? And what? 40, okay, so 12,800 minutes, which is, right? Okay, if you are going to divide it by 6, 2, 1, 223. It's like, it comes to around, I think 50, 60 hours of, data, right? But quantitative researchers will not look at that number. 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. No, there are instances where you have to use quantitative data, right? But most of the time, quantitative data only will explain, right? For instance, impact of commercials on purchase behavior. You have a study like this, right? So you'll have to decide whether you will use positivism or interpretivism. How do you want to measure this? You want to measure impact of a specific advertisement. You can't say, advertisements in general. You can't study that. It's going to be then, I think, by the time you study all advertisements, it will be 50 years, 60 years, and sometimes you die, not doing that also. So you have to be very specific. For example, you can talk about a specific genre of advertising, a specific field or domain, alright? So how you want to find out impact of course, advertising agencies do this research, right? But you want to do it in a different way. Okay, we'll discuss, an example and the other side of that. So how would you do it? Impact of any ads of your choice? Facebook ads. No, I'm talking about commercials. Let's limit to commercials now. I'll come to that later. I have not seen any ad recently. Huh? Kellogg's. Okay. No. So he's saying, okay, impact of, there's a lot of this thing stuff. Impact of commercials and how children influence, the purchase decision of parents, whatever, right? So you can do that, or just that. Impact of commercials on consumers purchase decision? How do they decide whether to buy this product or not? I mean, do they decide to buy the product because they watched this commercial? So that's what you want to find out. No, so what happens here? You want to find out whether commercials impact purchase decision. Watching commercials lead to purchasing this product. So there is we call it causal explanation. Cause, effect. There is a cause and there is an effect. It just explains. So your research is limited only to that. So positivist, how would a positivist try to understand this? Somebody can explain it. If you want to follow a positivism mode of research, how would you do it? How would you measure this? I said positivism is quantitative. Okay. How? You give questionnaires? Okay. Okay. Parents and children separately? Okay. What do you analyze? Impact, huh? Okay, that's what is normally done. As you said, in positivism, the impact is... So what is the impact? Of course, you should... So purchase decision is the impact, right? That is what you want to measure. So how will you measure this purchase decision, right? So you will ask them, did you buy, anytime recently, when did you buy, whatever. And then you also have to ask questions relating to the commercial, right? And then you can sort of do some tests, statistical tests, correlation tests, to find out if one affects the other, if one impacts the other, all right? This study, now, you think, interpretivism can be adopted for this research? You want to measure impact. How would you do it? Interpretivism is qualitative research. Now, this is the same topic. Of course, qualitative research will not use the word impact. It might be something else, but how would you do this research? Expose the children. No. I just done away with the children part, right? We'll just say for this moment, it's only parents, right? Okay, Kellogg, of course, children also should be, fine. Let's say parents for this one. So how would you do it? You ask her. Okay. You cannot. I have 2 hours. Open up. If it is qualitative research, how would you do it? In positivism, the questioner is, saying that if there is something, it's a real world, it is like an object, impact is like an object, purchase decision is like an object, everything is treated that way, right? Now what happens in qualitative research, how would you measure it? If you want to know, it's no rocket science here. Okay, so how would you do it? Okay, you have, as you said, discussions, right? Okay, you spend time talking to them, interviewing them, right? Okay, so what happens in quantitative research? You give questionnaires, right? You get data, and you put it in an Excel, all the data, and then you get numbers. Always remember, in quantitative research, you get numbers. 100 respondents, right? Age group, all this demographics, gender, right? Income. All of this, they are seeking an option. They seek an option. But in qualitative research, we are not giving anything like this, right? We are not giving options. We just ask questions. If it is an interview, they respond. All right? So it's in the form of an open-ended. It's a text. What you get is text. Here, what you get is, for example, question number 12. You have 4 options: A, B, C, D. Right? So you have question number 12. You have respondent 1. Below that, respondent 2. Respondent 1 for the question number 12 says A. Respondent 2 says B. Respondent 3 says D. Count the number of A's, number of B's, right? So we get mostly you understand what I'm saying? We get mostly what you call, we'll take a questionnaire and then do that. Numbers. That's why you call it quantitative. And then we correlate numbers, right? We correlate numbers. Numbers of people who say that, yes, they watched commercial, and they bought this product, right? Numbers wherein people say that they watched but they did not, right? There could be some where they say that they did not watch but they came to know through neighbors, right? And you are actually then establishing a relationship using the numbers, right? And my criticism is numbers mean nothing, right? Numbers cannot explain feelings, explain emotions, explain whatever, right? Whatever we feel, experience. And that's why I would suggest we go for qualitative research. All right? It's easy to do quantitative research, but qualitative research, the toughest part is, the challenging part is, well, you have the data now, pages and pages of data. How do we analyze? Right? Okay, that's we're going to see how we're going to analyze. Right? That takes time, and that's why we don't go for numbers. Recently, I presented a paper on this. I told you yesterday, right? The last class, and embodiment effect in mobile phones. I had interviewed 5 candidates. Mobile phone. I had interviewed 5 candidates, just 5 candidates, and 5 is what should I say? It's demeaning number, when it comes to quantitative research. So I completed my presentation, and somebody came down and said, "Hey, the paper was good, but you should have actually taken more sample size, like 50, 60." I said this is qualitative research, but it's very difficult, to convince people because, school is sort of oriented more towards quantitative and not qualitative, right? Ohio School, for example, of journalism, oriented more towards quantitative, maybe small qualitative analysis like content analysis, etc. But other than that, they are very, very strong in quantitative research, right? And when you go present these papers, it will not carry much weight. Right? So these are the major, differences. Okay? So now I'm going to give you examples and then ask you if you can. So if you want to find out which sort of marriage is acceptable to society, right? See, you have to understand. How about distributing questionnaire to people to find out whether love marriage or arranged marriage? No, I'm just giving you some, what should I say? Good examples, right? Or, he asked a very good question here. I still remember, Mubashir asked us a question. What is he doing? Okay, so he made a presentation on secularism, and so he asked, is it possible for an individual to be secular? Remember he asked this question? That's the question you asked, right? Nobody answers it. Secularism is a myth. But how many of you would say that you are secular or you are not? How many of you say? How many of you want to say that you are secular? I am secular. How many of you want to say that? Okay, by the way, you know what secularism means, right? Come back. What is secularism? Indifference to religion. Right? Do you want to add more? You understood what is that? Secularism? Huh? Yeah, madams are better. Okay. How many of you would want to say that I am secular? I guess you are not fundamentalist. Right? So nobody is secular. Nobody is secular in the class. And I like that, yes? Okay, why do you want to say you are not secular? Or why are you saying that you are otherwise? Okay, yes, he is fine. Others. So everyone has a strong affinity towards religion, right? No, but why? So for example, if I want to measure secularism, I just asked you, isn't it? Are you secular? Yes, no. Now I can distribute a questionnaire and you will write yes, no. No, for example, there could be a junkie in this class. You know who a junkie is? Okay, junkie is a drug addict. Drug addict. Now, if I distribute a questionnaire, are you a junkie? Yes, no.
Yeah. Now that is another disadvantage of quantitative, because questionnaire is self-reported, right? Now, but that doesn't happen. So if I want to measure secularism, are you secular? Yes, no, right? So how else can secularism be measured? No, don't ever ask this yes/no question and call this research, right? Even in quantitative research, right? So how else would you measure secularism? Now, suggest you give me some ways and methods. Now, if we ought to use the positivist method, use a questionnaire, how will you measure secularism? Scales of 1 to 5, right?
Yes.
No, it's not like that. We'll discuss these scales, yeah. So, what are the statements you will have? Okay, agree, disagree, that is easily, yes. But what are the statements you will have to measure secularism? One statement, I just want to know, this is a test for you guys also. No, you're not using the word secular. You should not use the word secular in, it is like this. There will be some 5 to 10 statements, right? Statements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for each statement, you have, okay? So, statement 1. For all these 10 statements put together, they are trying to measure secularism. So to measure secularism, one statement is not sufficient. So you have to have 10 or 15 or 20, whatever. So this is what they do in quantitative research. So just tell me what statements, couple of statements that you want to have. Okay, let's make research simple, right? So let's not use
just as a question or how you feel when you see the crust.
Okay, so he's saying how, but that's the question, right? No, see, mostly our tendency is to ask questions, right? Not frame sentences, statements. Okay? Now, these kind of questions, so you have to understand. Now, if I'm going to give these sentences, 15, 20, 25. But do you think, now, on the one hand, I'm creating, a statement like this, a set of statements, and on the other, I'm using qualitative research method, that I go interview, right? Okay, I take some person to IRCTC canteen, sit there and interview. I actually took all these, visually challenged students to Madanjit Singh building between 7 and 9, and one of your seniors was with me, who assisted me in this. That's where I conducted the interview, right? So you can take people, and so you sit there and it goes on and on. So on the one hand, I'm doing it using questionnaire. On the other hand, I'm using it, doing it through interviews. Right? We're just talking only about interviews for the time being. Now, do you think interview that goes on for 1 hour, and what you do with 5 people, right? Will have all these 25, or will have more of all? Yeah, you'll have more of, right? No, that is something which you need to understand. So there is depth. When you actually conduct interviews, you get a lot of interesting stuff. And it is the person who talks, that is something more interesting than giving it in a questionnaire and asking somebody, to tick or whatever, right? And second, when I create such statements, there is a sort of top to bottom approach. I decide what secularism is, right? Okay, they test this. They test and they say, they test the reliability of the scale, how reliable it is. You know what is reliability, right? Whenever you use it, why do you call it a scale? Because it's an instrument to measure secularism. Like how you use a scale to measure the length, breadth, whatever. We are using a scale to measure any psychological phenomenon, any sociological phenomenon, anything. We are using a scale, right, in social science. Yeah. So in fact, you get more in-depth data. So when I'm actually creating these statements, I'm saying that, I decide what secularism should, how secularism is understood, should be understood, etc. I decide. And then I give 25 statements. And then I expect you, to say yes or no. Only to these 25 statements. So even in case if you have additional perspectives or thoughts, there is no way you can actually express them. Right? So it's sort of limiting. Okay, that's another disadvantage of quantitative research. It's especially when you're dealing with, such issues. Is that clear? So I'll now give you examples. Time, ரெண்டு கிளாஸ் தெரியுமா சத்தம் போடாம விட்டுறேன் don't worry. Okay, I'm going to tell you the topic and you'll have to tell me how would you do it. If it is positivism, how would you do it if it is interpretivism, or whether it is possible to follow both methods, right? You can let me know. You can tell me whether it's possible to use both methods or you can use only one method. Audience preference for and their perceptions of Kannan Devan and its any tea, Taj tea, whatever, any tea. Audience's preference for and perceptions of a tea, it's a brand. Okay? Their preference, why they prefer, and their perceptions. What are their perceptions? So what kind of questions will you ask if you are using positivism? And do you want to use both positivism and interpretivism? It's a simple one where you're just trying to find out. So it's more of a market research, right? So you don't have to go find out, sit 1 hour with these people and talk to them and ask them. You see, there's nothing like you can't do it, all right? But it's rather, appropriate to use positivism, right? So you can talk, you can ask questions. So can you just give me a few questions? I'm talking about perceptions of Taj tea. What are the other teas here? 3 roses. Okay, so what are some questions? Okay, no, I'm not talking about ad at all. Okay, he wants to have 1 question or 2 questions, whatever, right? No, I'm not trying to find out why they buy. I'm just trying to find out what is their understanding. How do they see this particular brand? Right? How do they see this particular brand? So how do you want to estimate? Understand? Questions. What questions would you like to have? Okay. No open-ended questions, right? So just give me a few features what you want to measure. How do you measure perception? What perception? What color, taste, smell, price, cost, whatever. Okay. So these are the specific questions. So 1-page questionnaire will do for this, right? Or maybe 2-page questionnaire. So you can easily measure this. Okay. So positivism. Okay. Political advertising, television commercials. Not advertising, political commercials, television commercials of the major parties, and you have to measure how negative they are, right? Do you understand the question? Political advertisements and how negative they are. Okay, so what are the 2 things that you're going to measure in this? Okay, see, this is called research problem. First off, you'll have some difficulty in arriving at a research problem. What is it that you want to study? Alright, now this is something, okay. Advertising of the parties and how negative they are. So, what are the phenomena that you are actually analyzing, studying here? What are the key things in this political television commercial and of the major political parties? No. From this statement, what are the 2-3 key things that you want to measure? Political advertising, especially television advertising, and what did you say? Yeah, negative, right? So actually, what are the things that you want of? Okay, right? So television advertising is one, and the other one? No, it's very clear, right, in the statement. Political advertisements of the political parties, right? Of major political parties, and how negative they are. So what are you actually going to measure? You get result in the end, like every end semester. Okay, he's saying how political parties misuse. Okay, no, not actually, that is not specified. It's as simple as this. Advertisements, right, or commercials, and how negative they are. And these are the 2 things that you want to measure, isn't it? From this statement, what are you going to measure? 2 things. Commercial and negativity. Yeah, you can say negativity. Now, these two things, how would you measure? Now you think about positivism, you think about interpretivism, and how would you measure? He's saying he wants to use interpretivism. So when you use interpretivism, what will you do? You have to measure commercials, study commercials, and negativity. So interpretivism, what are you doing? No, you're not studying effect. That's where you have to be very clear. This is about commercials and their negativity. We are not actually, that's the scope of the study. You cannot go out of the scope, outside this. So how are you measuring negativity? Okay, now I'm saying you have to use only positivism. Tell me, how do you want to do the study? Questionnaire? And what do you find? What do you do? Questionnaire. There's nothing specified about audience involvement in this, right? So there is a possibility for a researcher to do the study on his own without necessarily involving audience. Without necessarily involving audience, you understand what I'm saying? What did I say? I said, there is nothing specified as to whether the audience is involved and whether you have to interact with, any respondent. There is nothing specified in that. So it also means you can do it without involving anybody. So the researcher can be the person and he is interacting with certain reality which is there in the form of advertisement, which is out there in the form of advertisement, which is positivism. No, but I don't want people's comments. So when you start getting people's comments, it is about people's perception of how they perceive it, both commercials as well as negativity. You can measure it from their perception, but it is not about that. So, then you have to slightly rephrase this statement, the research question. But here it is just about television commercials and how negative they are. So you might as well do it by doing a content analysis. Simple quantitative content analysis. I'm not talking about qualitative content analysis, that's different. Sort of counting, the number of, so how are you going to measure negativity? That is, something important, right? So you will come across a lot of these concepts in research. Violence. What is violence? Violence can be measured in various forms, right? So you have to first, define this, right? So how are you going to measure negativity? So I'll take a commercial and I'll do a content analysis and I'll have to measure negativity in that. How? I'll take a commercial and I have to measure violence in that. How? Or I take a movie and I have to measure violence in that. Okay. Now, epistemology is how you want to find out the knowledge. Ontology says knowledge exists, right, somewhere, and how do you want to seek and find out this knowledge? Whether by using content analysis, right? So your method is understood. Your method is determined using your epistemological assumptions, right? What method you want to use, right? That is understood based on the epistemological assumption. So how do you want to find out certain truth? So now I ask this question, isn't it? How would you measure? So when you say I will do like this, that is epistemology, right? You said, he said he will use interpretivism, he will use interviews, focus group discussions. That is epistemology. How do you want to find out certain information? That statement which I read out, that is ontology. And you'll have to just go through the article and see if there are numbers anywhere in each of the articles. You can decide quantitative or qualitative. Or just go through the method. If you go through each article, there will be a method title, subtitle. Just go through that. They will tell you, whether it is interview or questionnaire, etc. Just note that and come. It's interview, it's questionnaire. Okay, now it is this presentation. What we are going to do is, we are going to actually have you guys deal with current affairs a lot, right? Some of them are a big deal.